Hi, how are you doing tonight? I'm Roberta Colasino, and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator here in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. I'm coming to you tonight with a solitary stamp set. It doesn't have any punches or dies, it's just a stamp set. And while it is considered a holiday item, it can absolutely be used any time of year, and I look for things like that. Because Santa Claus stamps can only be used one time a year, and that's great, that's okay. But I like to invest my money in things that I know that I can use multiple times. So that's what I'll be doing tonight, is showing you different ways to use this stamp set. And I'll go right ahead and turn the camera down so that we can get started. Okay, actually looks pretty good. Let me just bring it in a little bit closer. There we go. I like you to be able to see what I'm doing. All right, so you are watching me on my public Facebook group, 11 Lakes Stamper Creatives. And I can also be found on YouTube under the same name, 11 Lakes Stamper. And you can shop my store at www.rcolasino.stampinup.net and email 11lakestamper@gmail.com. And I welcome email anytime that you have a question about anything. I'd love to hear from you, and with any luck, I can answer your question. Okay. On camera, it's looking crooked, and I have it right lined up on the lines. I don't know just how OCD I want to be about this, but we'll see. Let's see if that does it or not. I usually turn it the wrong way the first time. Yep, and so I did. All right, well, I'll keep playing with it as we go along. That looks better. I can live with that. So let me show you the stamp set. It is called Most Wonderful, which is a little confusing for those of us who've been around with Stampin' Up! For a long time, because Stampin' Up! has had a set called The Most Wonderful Time of the Year, and while that is the sentiment that you can put in the center, it's not the name of the stamp set. And I think there have also been some stamp sets with very similar names as well. So this one is just called Most Wonderful, not Most Wonderful Time or Most Wonderful anything, just Most Wonderful. It does get a little confusing. It's a very cool set, even though it only contains 4 stamps. What you have are 2 stamps that could be used as a border on their own. You have a stamp that is a wreath that you could use alone, and you have a sentiment that you could probably use on another card by itself as well. There's no die or punch to cut it out. You would just have to put it on a circle or fussy cut it out or whatever. But there's multiple things that you can do with this, and that's what I wanted to show you tonight. So one of the things that I did discover, though, was that if I wanted to stamp the whole thing, it doesn't fit on any blocks that I have. I know Stampin' Up! Makes one extra large block that I think I've just never gotten my hands on for whatever reason. So I got out the Stamparatus. So I tried to do a bunch of the stamping ahead of time. Again, Stampin' Up! No longer sells the Stamparatus. However, you can probably find them used if you really like theirs. I like theirs a lot. I really do honestly believe it was one of the best ones on the market because of its double stamping possibilities. Maybe I'll have to do another demonstration at some point, but it seems odd to do a demonstration on something that you can't buy from me, but you could buy, like I said, possibly online somewhere. And a lot of people like the Misty. I've had very little experience with the Misty, but I borrowed someone's once, and I found it to be kind of flimsy. I did buy years ago, before I started the whole Stampin' Up! Thing, the Tim Holtz stamp platform, which I think is pretty good. There are several companies that make them. I'm sure you can find one that would suit your needs. All right, so where to start here? Let's see. So the first card that I made was obviously, well, and I don't want to say obviously not a Christmas card, because the colors that you choose to use for Christmas are really entirely up to you. I've always liked blue and silver for Christmas. So what I did here, and I had to re-ink my pad because it was really dry, and I may have over-inked it. So what I did here was I inked up just the wreath part of this in balmy blue, which, as you know, is a pretty light color. And these little pine boughs here represent the balmy blue color right out of the ink pad. But honestly, I think I put a lot of ink in there. It was very juicy, and as a result, it came out a little bit darker. My intention initially was to stamp it in balmy blue so that it would be very light, and then I would come in either with the watercolor pencils or maybe with the blends, and I would add color to it. But I decided that these were really just fine on their own, and even though it does have a bluish tinge to it, it definitely, I see green when I look at that, which I don't see when I look at balmy blue cardstock, but maybe that's just me. So then what I did was I got out some of the watercolor pencils, and I got out, just so that you know what I used, first of all, I got out the blender pen because I rarely use the watercolor pencils without the blender pen unless I'm using watercolor paper, in which case I use a brush and I use water. So I got out the Night of Navy watercolor pencil, and I got out the balmy blue watercolor pencil, and then I remembered that in the latest set they had one that they were just calling blue. And I believe that it was supposed to look a little bit like the Azure Afternoon. And I understand why Stampin' Up! Has done that, because while they do come out with new blends every time there are new colors, they can't just keep coming out with sets of watercolor pencils. So they update them once in a while, but not very often. So by calling it blue, they leave it kind of generic. So I started to go through and I colored the ones that you see here that appear to be the lightest color. I colored those with the balmy blue, and I didn't press too hard. I purposely went pretty light on them. Then I went through with the other blue, which I decided was similar to Azure Afternoon, and I colored some of them. You can see they're just a little bit darker than the balmy blue. And I kind of scattered those around here and there. They have like a little bit of a turquoisey kind of look to them. And then when I was all done with that, I zeroed in on a few others, and with a kind of a heavy hand, I did the Night of Navy so that they were in there. So the majority of these are definitely balmy blue with a few of the blue mixed in and very few of the Night of Navy. And I like the contrast. And because the balmy blue ink, especially being juicy, and the balmy blue pencil really don't look the same, it gave me a fourth color, which I really liked. All right, now if I were going to put anything on here in the way of a ribbon or anything on here on the way of an embellishment, I personally think I would go for silver. And I honestly don't know. I tried to put away all of my retired embellishments so that I didn't keep grabbing them by accident, but sometimes I don't have a choice. I don't always buy all of the embellishments. I have two things here of retired embellishments that I forgot to look at before I came on air tonight, and it seems like somewhere along the line there had to have been silver dots. So that's what I was looking for. And of course, no, they're not in here. They're like some, what do I want to call it, mechanical type silver dots, and I don't think I would want to use those. So I'm not sure what I might do. The other thing that I often do is I take a silver Sharpie or a bronze colored Sharpie or a gold colored Sharpie, and I use that instead. But I'd like to do something a little bit different. Now, oh, you know what I just thought of? We have the, hang on one second, they're right behind me. They're right behind me, but naturally I grabbed the wrong one first. Here we go. So these are retired, and these are the metallic enamel effects basics, and these are the pearlized enamel. So the pearlized come in red, black, and a white pearl, and the metallic comes in a gold, a kind of a bronze or brass maybe. Gold and copper. Sorry, gold, copper, and silver. So I might use these. The problem with these is that they take a good half hour or so to at least dry to the touch. So I'm afraid to do that now and have, risk me accidentally put something on top of them. But let's say I don't want to make it Christmassy and I don't want to put any embellishments. This could certainly be a happy birthday card. Or I was thinking what would really be nice, and I know we had a set at one time. I don't think I had it, but for a welcome to the neighborhood, like a housewarming card, might be very nice. And I know we have some nice sentiments that just say welcome, and then on the inside you could write to your new home or your new neighborhood or something like that. And then this would certainly not be a holiday card at all, but it makes you think of a house because people hang wreaths on their door. So I'm not sure. I might even make 2 versions of this card. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle that. So then I thought, okay, we got to get down to Christmas, right? We've got to do a Christmas. Oh, wait, before Christmas, I decided we needed to do fall. So I took a crumb cake card base. I took a piece of basic black, and typically I punch a hole or die cut something out of the center of this so I don't feel like I'm wasting it. It's just going to have a very narrow border, and the reason for that is because this stamp is so wide that to cut it to be 4 by 5 1/4, I had to come super, super close to the edges, which meant that I had to make this a little bit bigger than I would normally make it so that there's just a touch of the black showing and then just a touch of the other showing. So that is something to keep in mind. It works very well if you make it like this one on the card base where you have a full 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Gives you a little bit more room. All right, so let's go ahead and assemble this card. And this one I did, I used the colored pencils again. I used Real Red, Cherry Cobbler, let's see, Real Red, Cherry Cobbler. Oh, I know what I did. This is an important trick for you to know. I stamped the entire thing. The only thing I didn't put on were the 2 end pieces. I stamped the whole thing, including this, in Old Olive. And I did that because I knew that the Old Olive would be fine for the leaves and would be fine for this, although I wanted a touch of something darker here, okay? And, no, I lied. This isn't the one where I used Old Olive. This is the one where I used crumb cake. Sorry, stamped the whole thing in crumb cake. And you can tell just by looking at this that this is not crumb cake, okay? But I knew the crumb cake would make a good background. So then I got out the colored pencils and the blender pen, and I went ahead and I added some green to this. You can kind of see where I did that there. I used the garden green and a little bit of Old Olive, and it blended quite nicely. And then I used Real Red, Cherry Cobbler, Cajun Craze, Pumpkin Pie, and Daffodil Delight to color these. And on some of the leaves, just some, and it's really hard to see, but I'll see if I can point it out. On some of the leaves, I colored them in crushed curry and then added a little bit of olive green to either the tip or the base so that it really looked like a green leaf changing colors. So I hope you can see some of that. All right, so I spent a bit of time, I'll admit, doing it, and then I had to go through with the blender pen when I was done. Then I peeled the wreath portion off of the Stamparatus, inked up this stamp alone, just the center, with early espresso. So all I had left on the Stamparatus was this, and I knew it was in the right position because I peeled everything else away from around it, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Okay, so I inked that up with early espresso and then stamped it a couple of times so that that no longer looked like crumb cake. It was a nice dark brown. All right. So that's how that one went. So that was just kind of a little trick to know that I could start out with one solid color and that then I could go ahead and add the other colors later by using a light enough color that I could cover it up with almost any color. And since fall colors tend to be darker colors, I knew I could get away with that. All right, and this is a little tricky just because there's such a small edge. All right, this thing that I do actually helps the cardstock to move a little bit when I see that it's not exactly where I wanted it to be. And because with liquid glue you've got a tiny bit of wiggle room, that really helps a lot. Okay, so that goes there, and then this goes here. I make sure I get plenty in the corners, still not enough to ooze out, but enough so that the corners don't come up. That really bugs me when the corners of things start to come up on my projects, whether it's a card or something else. I just don't like pieces of it popping up. Okay, so again, just a very, very small border here. Okay, and I love fall. I'm sure you've heard me say that a zillion times. And so when I say most wonderful time of year, I mean fall, because it probably is my favorite time of year, not just because of the colors. All right, so on a card this color, I don't always put a white liner. I know some people really like to have a white liner no matter what. All right, now because this stamp set doesn't come with any other bits and bobs, any other pieces, there's a couple of things I could do. I'm trying to remember if I made more than one of these, and I don't think I did. No, I was thinking of something different. Okay, so what I could do is I've got some stuff left over from last week and the week before. So I could just take a couple of leaves that I die cut last week from the Amber Autumn set. Actually, they're both orange. I wonder if I have another one in a packet over here. Usually I do. Oh, yes, I do. And I knew where it was. Like, you have to understand what a major miracle that is. Okay, a minor miracle. But a miracle nonetheless. All right, so I've got, looks like some Cajun craze and maybe some pecan pie. So since we don't really have a stamp that we could put in here, we could use the border stamps, the top or the bottom, but then I'd have to really stamp it up and do that whole coloring again, and I don't think you want to or need to watch me do that. So we'll just use these for now. You may have also heard me say I do a whole bunch of thrift shopping, both here and when I'm in Florida. And things like this little dish, I pick up at thrift shops. And sometimes, you know, it was supposed to be a set of 4, but one got broken, so there's only 3. But for what I use them for, it's just fine. And I have those dishes all over my craft room. And then on occasion, I take them upstairs and clean them up and use them for food. You know, if I'm having people over, I might use that to put little dips in or things like that. So they're multi-purpose, and that's what I like. In my stamps, in my things that I purchase for the house, I like things that I can use in different ways. It makes me feel less guilty about the things I buy. Okay, so there we go. Love that card. Love the blue. All right, now... All right, then I'll have to show you some stamp surgery that I did. All right, so here's another one that I made, and this one is on a real red background, and I did have a liner, although I didn't stamp anything on it just yet. Not sure if I will, but maybe. And I stamped this one in, this is Old Olive, but I did the same trick where when I was done with this, I pulled this out, and I stamped the center in Garden Green. So you've got a little bit of a contrast there. And then I thought, well, I could put this on the envelope, but when I got it out and really looked at it, what I realized was, that wasn't going to really cut it. It was going to look kind of goofy because it wasn't big enough. So I flipped the envelope over and put it over here. Now, if I wanted to, I could probably put one on the other side, but then I'd have to put a stamp over it. Although here, well, I could put my return address label a little bit further over to one side. So that's what I decided to do to decorate my envelope for this one. Okay, now as far as I'm concerned, this could be fine just the way it is without any added colors at all. What I could do if I wanted to is to leave that blank. In other words, not try to fill in the leaves, but I could take a real red blend and just for a pop of color, I could go around, and I know we have stamps somewhere that are like a trio of berries, and I know that we have an embellishment at one point that was a trio of berries. If not, we had the real red basic gems that were kind of like the rhinestone gems but red, and I'm just kind of putting them around where I see some of the the pine bough or whatever you want to call it. I think it's better if you leave a little space between them. I didn't there. Otherwise, they just kind of blur into a blob and it's hard to tell what it is. So if I leave a little bit of space, I think it looks better. Just my opinion. So I'm just doing a grouping of 3 every here and there. And I could be very happy with the way that looks without doing anything else. I honestly could. And if you want to color it, it is certainly there for you to color, for sure. And you could use colored pencils, or you could use your blends to color this. We have blends in Old Olive for sure. Or you could mix colors. That's what the blends are all about. You could mix a darker color and a lighter color. So let's put this one together. Last week I worked on some cards that I said I would finish off camera, and I started to finish them, got some done and didn't finish them. I don't know. I have to learn to start saying no to things. I'm finding that I'm a professional volunteer and that I'm not leaving myself enough time for work things. I don't want to say for the things that I really enjoy, because I really enjoy the whole work volunteer thing. All right, now I realized that I had left, I purposely stamped this lower down because I was thinking of putting a ribbon up there. I could not find a red ribbon that was in, what do you call it, that was current. I found a really pretty, not cranberry, oh, what's it called? Cherry cobbler ribbon with gold, which I thought would be nice, but I think I'm going to save that and I'll show you what for. But what you can do, that I've shown you before, but I'll show you again real quickly. I don't know if I'll do the whole thing here, but I'll show you. You can take a ribbon, and this is a current ribbon. This is the woven ribbon. It's a 1/2 inch ribbon and it's in white. You can take a ribbon like this. You know, I've never tried to color with my blends on the glass to see if it would stain the glass. And I feel like I don't want to find out the hard way that it does. So give me a second and I'll get a piece of scrap paper. I think I also said last week that this ribbon is pretty good for tying bows because it's pretty soft and flexible. So let's just, I use these little tiny short pins that I used to get at Joann's, and I suppose you can find them other places. I don't know exactly what their purpose is because they're unusually short, but they're great for the ribbon. Okay. But what you can do is you can get like a double thickness of scrap paper here just to be on the safe side. You can take your blend. Let's make sure I get the real red, and I think I would probably want to use the dark one. And you are going to want to use the brush end, but you're going to want to be very careful that you don't break the brush tip, because it's very easy to do that. So you're not coloring like this straight up and down. You're going to be using the side of the brush, and you're just going to color along the ribbon. And you can color an entire length of ribbon that way. Probably uses a fair amount of ink, I'd want to warn you, and since the blends are a little bit pricey, you may not want to spend your money on them to do this with. However, the other option would be to mix a little rubbing alcohol and your red re-inker in a dish, preferably a dish that's not porous so you don't ruin the dish. All right, and I say the alcohol because the alcohol will help it to dry faster. So this is kind of a lot to be doing this whole ribbon with this, but it was neater than showing you the other way. All right, and I'm kind of almost done, and because they're alcohol markers, it dries pretty quickly. And it soaks through to the other side, so it almost doesn't matter which side you do. I'm holding it down with the scissor, though, because I don't want my fingers to get red. They were green almost all day today, and I finally got the green off, so I don't want to have any more colored fingers today. And again, I'm not doing like a perfect job here. You'd really have to take your time if you wanted to get all the light spots covered up, or maybe you wouldn't care that there were some lighter spots. You might think that was kind of a cool variation. Okay, and then I'm just gonna give it a little shake. Like I said, because they're alcohol markers, they do dry pretty quickly. Yep, nothing coming off right now. I'm not sure about this ribbon though, if it might be too thick for this spot where I wanted to put it, but we will see. I was watching a TV show a little while before I came on the air, and in the TV show it was winter, and everybody was freezing and wearing their winter coats and complaining about the temperatures, and I thought, you know, here in upstate New York, that's going to be here before we know it. We quite often, well, I don't like that bow at all, so I'm going to have to redo that, but I think that will look nice there. It'll be okay, but I have to redo that bow because it's kind of funky looking. I'm going to pull it out so it doesn't get all wrinkled in the wrong position. So that's card number 3. And then the last card that I also made, and another trick that I want to show you, and I'll have to pull out the stamp set to show you what I did. I decided to stamp one using the whole shebang. Okay, so I took the whole thing out and put it on the Stamparatus, and I stamped the whole thing in Garden Green. And then something kind of funny happened. So this was in Garden Green too, but I decided, what if I emboss it in gold? Will that work? Will it come out? And it did. Hope you can see it. But I was a little sloppy with my embossing powder, and so some of these areas got a little gold in them, and I think it looks really cool. And I did not do it on purpose. So that's kind of funny. And just so that you know, one of the ways that you can use your blender pen is that you could dip your blender pen into your Versamark ink. It's a watermark ink pad. It's a sticky ink, and it's perfect for embossing. You can dip the tip of one of these into this, and then you could color in a little area where you wanted to emboss and go ahead and emboss with it. The other thing, Stampin' Up! Does not sell this, but I have bought them online. Versamark, the same company that makes the ink pad, also makes, or they did, I haven't bought them in a while, a Versamark marker. And it has its dual tip, so it has a brush end and a bullet tip. And you can use this, like if you wanted to hand write some type of a sentiment and emboss it, you could do that with this. I haven't done a lot with this other than to do like repair, to tell you the truth. So I haven't played with them a lot. But they're out there. I think I got those on Amazon. Well, one on Amazon and one in a craft store in Florida. Okay, so I really like that. And again, I question, do I really need to do something else here? Can I leave this like this? Do I want to color that in? Do I want to add the red berries? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't know, but I was perfectly okay with leaving it alone. All right, but then I wanted to see what it would look like if I made a card, or even the liner of this card. I wasn't even really sure what I was going to do. I was just playing around basically. And I wanted to do just the border type on the top and the bottom. The first time I did it, what happened was I went slightly off down here on the bottom. Okay, I went slightly off the card, so it was like not quite to the edge over here and over the edge there. So I flipped it over and was more careful this time, I thought, to line it up more over this way. And what happened was the same exact thing happened. Same exact thing. Too far over here and too far over the other way here. So I thought, okay, obviously there's a problem. So I got out the stamp set, and what I ended up doing on one of these was to take a black Sharpie, and I made an arrow. You can't see it very much anymore because it actually got cut off, but I'll explain that in a minute. So I made an arrow that pointed this way to remind myself, okay, that this would be the bottom piece always when I was stamping, and that I would take this piece and move it further over than it looked like it should be to the right. And so I tried that again, and the same thing happened. I was too far over to one side. Not as bad as before, but too far over. So that's when I said, okay, I'm looking at this. When I place this on the Stamparatus and on my paper, I'm looking at it from above, and I'm thinking that it looks just fine to me. And that's when I stamp and find out that it's not just fine. So what I did was I got out my scissors, and I don't ever use my snips for these. These are Tim Holtz scissors. They're not particularly great for cutting paper because they have like a bit of a serration to them, but they're very good for cutting rubber and other things. I mean, I don't know that I would cut wire with them. I try to be careful, but I went around the edge and I cut. Now, normally I've told you when I do what I call stamp surgery, I do it because there's an excess of rubber on the edges, which happens during manufacturing, and maybe they didn't cut quite enough off. And the easiest way to do it is to flip it over so you can see that rubber edge and to gently lean in and cut. But you have to keep checking because I cut off a piece of a word once. That was bad. So you do have to keep checking to make sure you're not cutting into anything but the rubber and that you're not cutting into the pictures or the images. And what I always tell people is be very careful never to cut any of the white stuff. Don't cut any of the foam because that helps to balance the stamp and keep it from rocking when you stamp. However, in this case, I broke my own rule. I snipped off a little bit here and a little bit here, and look how close I came there to that leaf, but that's not the stamp, that's just the image. And by doing that, I ensured that I finally got one right. And it's still not perfect. It still could go over just the tiniest bit more, but I can't trim any more off, so I'm just going to have to remember that trick about moving it over to the right. So I thought this might make a good liner for this card. Okay, and there's no gold in here, but that doesn't matter. And instead of course, I could have just stamped it on the inside, but I was experimenting and I didn't want to ruin my card. So it makes a good liner as well. And then, like I said, you can do the envelope of this card the same way I did the envelope on this card. So this is, I would say, pretty definitely a Christmas card. Pretty definitely. And I think that I would like to use this ribbon and add some berries to this, but instead of using real red this time, I'll use cherry cobbler since that ribbon is cherry cobbler. Now, here's the only thing. Because I stamped, because I stamped right on this, if I use this, it's going to show through, it's going to leak through. So I didn't think about that, to be very honest with you. Didn't think about that at all. So I think I would have to use a cherry cobbler embellishment instead. And that could be achieved by taking something like your pearls and using the cherry cobbler blend to color them. Or even the basic rhinestone gems. Although they wouldn't look as much like a berry as a pearl would, I think. I think the pearls would look a little bit more like a berry. And I've got just a few of the larger ones left, although the small ones might be okay. So because this is an alcohol marker, you can color your embellishments and the color will not come off. I mean, you might want to wait, a minute or two. And you want to make sure that you get all the way around. I'm using the bullet tip because I'm afraid to ruin the tip on the brush part, but the brush part would probably do a better job, to be honest. But I'm getting there. All right, so we'll do a couple of big ones just so I can see what they might look like, and then we'll do some smaller ones. And since it is that time of year, I'm sure that these red gems will not go to waste at all. All right, and we'll do a couple of the small ones. I'll make sure I'm in frame here. And you really do not want to do this on your card because, as you can see, I'm hitting the surface of the paper that these are on, and you wouldn't want to do that with your card. It would not look too good. I don't know that I would want berries in 2 different sizes. I feel like I wouldn't. And the more I'm looking at the big ones, I'm almost feeling like they're too big, like they kind of stick out like a sore thumb. So let's put the rhinestones away because I don't think they are what I want. And we'll get my take your pick tool out and we'll get the putty tip out. And let's see how that will work. If I just push off a couple of those and put them kind of like in the same, oh, I don't want to put it there. Oh, come back. Okay, hang on. I don't want that there. There we go. I want it on the wreath. Okay. So I'm thinking I would probably need about twice as many of those. And I'm just going to put one instead of putting a grouping of 3, because then I'd use up all of my pearls until I can get some more anyway. All right, so I would say at least 4 or 5 more to finish that off. And then on the inside, because you really don't want to use pearls on the inside of your card, on the inside, I could go ahead and do the berry, but since I only did one on the outside, I'd probably only do one on the inside too. I don't know, that's maybe me overthinking things. I have a habit of doing that. I'm sure nobody will be counting my berries on any card that I send them. Not even my card making friends would count my berries, I'm guessing. But you just never know. Okay. So we've got those there. And we'll put that on the inside just as soon as I find my glue. There we go. Yeah, see, because that shows through. So we wouldn't want somebody to open their card and see that on the inside. Although, again, some people just might not care. But that, I think that would bug me. Okay, and then, let's see, I almost feel like a ribbon might be too much here, like maybe I should have left the top part off, but let's give it a look. And like I said, this is a retired ribbon. It retired in, well, it carried over, it says to 2025, but then it was on last chance. So I think this was gone in May of this year. I don't think it's still on last chance, but it might be worth a look just in case. Might be worth a look. If it was around in May, I suppose it could still be around. It's just so pretty and definitely very holiday-ish. At least I think so. All right, I'm going to stop doing the bunny ears thing and try something different, because when I do the bunny ears thing, I don't like the way it comes out. I used to, but now I don't. I don't know if I'm doing something different or what. But this is, yeah, not as easy. All right, let's see. Okay, that's, I think, the way I'm looking. Yep, that's what I was looking for. Only I didn't fold it in half well enough, so... Okay. Now I'm not doing it right. I can sense already that I'm not doing it right. This is why I hate making bows on camera. Okay, let's see. Flip it around. Yeah, that's it. And then push it that way. Did you see that? Because who knows when I'll get it right again. All right, and of course this is a little bit slippery, so you have to pull it really tight to make sure it stays. Okay, and then you've got one coming out the front and one coming out the back, but they're going in the same direction, which is what you're going for. Okay. So let's see if this is really what I want here or not. Well, you know what? Instead of putting it up there, I could put it at the top of the wreath, because typically if you have a wreath on your door and there's a bow on it, it's either right at the top or right at the bottom of the wreath. Am I right? I think I'm right. Best thing for bows is glue dots. Hands down, best thing for bows. No doubt about it. And they are sticky little suckers. They honestly are. Okay, I like that. I almost wouldn't mind if it was a tiny bit bigger, but that ship has sailed. So now we've got the, I keep wanting to call it cranberry. I don't even think we have a color called cranberry, although we probably did at one point. Cherry cobbler, dark cherry cobbler, coloring the basic pearl jewels, which are pretty much always there. They don't retire. I should be quiet because I say that and then they'll retire. So I'll color a few more of those and stick them on there. And I hope that you benefited from a couple of the little tricks that I told you or showed you. All right, so we have a fall one for sure. Oh, and I did bring out this. Stampin' Up! Used to sell this. It's an all-purpose paint, or ink. Actually, it's an ink. People called it paint, but it's an ink. And it came in gold. It came in like a snowy white, and it came in a champagne. And I bought them, and I loved them, and they discontinued them, but you can get them on Amazon. It says for Fantast X. I don't know what that means. But it's made by and I don't speak Japanese, so I'm going to hold it up. Maybe you can see it. It's a very well-known company for making inks and things like that. See the capital, all capital letters that begins with a T, Tsukineko, Sunico, something like that. And you can use this in a spray bottle with some alcohol to mist things. Or if I wanted to add some touches of gold to this, I could use it with a... naturally, I don't have one sitting right here. There's always one sitting right here. Well, a fan brush is called, and fan brushes are good for splatter. Some people just take a brush like this, though. I call this a stenciling brush. Some people call it a stipple brush, and just put a little bit on the end and do like this kind of a thing and splatter with it like that. And I might do that off camera. I don't want to get it all over, and I probably should have waited and not put my bow on yet. But a little bit of the splatter might be kind of cool around here. I had it in my mind that I might try it, but then I didn't. Okay, and then we've got the blue card, which I think is certainly not decidedly Christmas, but could be. It could even be Hanukkah. I don't know if people do Hanukkah wreaths or not. I never have, but that doesn't mean you can't do one. And in which case I would add some silver touches to it, because Hanukkah colors tend to be blue and white or blue and silver. So that would be kind of pretty. And then we've got an envelope that could go with this card or with this card, which is also definitely a Christmassy card, but done a little bit differently. And I think this one is screaming for a bow too. So I'm going to have to find some red ribbon to do that with. All right, so thank you very much for joining me tonight. And if you catch me on the replay or catch me on YouTube, please make a comment and say hello. I think somehow I've scared people. When people come on but they don't comment, I can see on my camera that they've come on, and I've been saying hello to them and saying, why don't you make a comment, tell us where you live, where you're watching from, whatever. And I've done that 3 weeks in a row now. So today I'm allowing them to remain anonymous, and I'm not calling them out and saying their names, but it's kind of frustrating because there are quite a few people who are watching who just don't want people to know they're watching. And I think they got a little freaked out when they found out that I could see that they were watching. I don't send people bursts of email. I don't do any of that stuff, I promise you. If you are interested in a catalog, if you're interested in a demonstrator, you can reach out to me in a private message, and I would be happy to help you out with that. If you have questions, I'd be happy to help you out with that as well. And if you are interested in ordering, I would certainly love to have your business, but I don't hound people. It's just not my style. All right, take care, have a very good evening, and I will see you in 1 week.